This story comes to us from abcnews.go.com. This is the story I've been waiting on. This is the story I've been looking forward to, and I pray that the jury comes back with a guilty verdict. I'll put a link to my original story when this incident happened 4 years ago in the description box. But Elijah Mcclain's fatal encounter with police began on a summer night in 2019 when a 911 caller, see something, say something, reported that a young black man looked sketchy. Why? Because he walked down the street wearing a ski mask and raising his hands in the air in Aurora, Colorado, which is a Denver suburb. Maybe he was cold. Now you say, well, it was in the summertime, but it was in Denver, Colorado, or Aurora, right in that area. Here in California, sometimes in the summer, it gets cold at night. I'm here to tell you, weather's freaky lately. It's been that way for a while. Now, Mcclain, who was often cold, was just walking home from a convenience store listening to music. That's it. That's all he was doing. That was his crime. But moments later, when police stopped him, and after struggling with him, they put the 23-year-old in a neck hold. Paramedics gave him a sedative that eventually officials have determined played a key role in his death days later. Mcclain was a massage therapist known for his gentle nature. He was unarmed and hadn't committed any crimes. He was walking home, had a ski mask on. So what? Is that a felony or a misdemeanor? But 4 years after his death, and his mother is just, her heart still aches over it. A trial for 2 of the officers was set to begin Friday with jury selection. Trials for a 3rd officer and 2 paramedics are scheduled to start later this year. Now, a jury will decide if officers Randy Rodema and Jason Rosenblatt are guilty of manslaughter, criminally negligent reckless homicide, and assault charges in a trial that they expect to last about a month. Rodema and Rosenblatt have pleaded not guilty, but have never spoken publicly about the allegations against them. Rodema, a former Marine who is currently suspended without pay, had been with the department for 5 years before Mcclain's death. Rosenblatt had worked for the agency for 2 years and is the only officer who confronted Mcclain, who was fired. Not for the fatal encounter, but for making light of the other officer's reenactment of the neck hold. And there was another story just after his death where they did a reenactment and the officers were making fun. Their attorneys, Donald Sisson for Rodema and Harvey Steinberg for Rosenblatt, didn't return requests for comment. Of course not. Now, these guys were indicted in 2021 by a state grand jury after an outcry over Mcclain's death following the police killing of George Floyd just a year prior to that, prior to their indictment. Mcclain's pleading words captured on body camera, including, this is what he said: "I'm an introvert and I'm different." He said that to them. They had him and he goes, "I'm an introvert. Hold on, I'm introverted." Meaning like, hey, I don't know what's going on, guys. He was trying to he was trying to de-escalate. Were the cops? No, they killed him. The grand jury indictment came nearly 2 years after a local prosecutor decided against prosecuting the officers, largely because the coroner's office could not determine exactly how Mcclain died. I don't know. I think there's more factors in there. Local prosecutor. He called Mcclain's death tragic, but said that finding made it hard to prove that the officer's actions caused his death. Body cameras, I'm going to tell you this too, body cameras largely played a role in finding these guys responsible. I want you to know that. Without body cameras, we don't know what happened. And again, I'll put the original story down below. Click that. You can see some of it. But that's why we record the cops. It's not because cops are bad. It's because there are bad cops. You get what I'm saying? So to all the law enforcement that may see this video, if any law enforcement officer ever sees this right here, we don't record you law enforcement officers because all cops are bad. We record you because there are bad cops. And you're not going to do it in the dark. You're going to do your little shenanigans and your nefarious activity in the light, my camera light, as we watch you and then put it on social media and turn it over to the Attorney General and the Department of Justice and the governor and whoever else can take that bad cop, handcuff him, and ship him up the river. That's why we record the police. And Elijah Mcclain is a great example of that. Tragically, he died. A revised coroner's report issued in 2021 said the cause of death was complications from the ketamine, but also noted that that occurred after Mcclain was forcibly restrained. Pathologist Stephen Sina wrote he couldn't rule out whether the stress of being held down by the officers may have contributed to Mcclain's death. Well, the ketamine itself, that's why you send the paramedics up the river. And then they talk about, I'm not going to give you the whole thing, but you can read it. They talk about giving him what they believe is an overdose of ketamine based on his small size, 140 pounds is what he weighed. They talk about his death and the reaction in Aurora, Colorado. It's a pretty lengthy story. Yeah, it goes way down. But you can read it down below. I just wanted to bring it to you that 2 of these cops are now going to face a jury, and 3 more, another cop and 2 paramedics, may be facing a jury later this year. We may finally see some justice in the death of Elijah Mcclain. I mean, that one was the worst one. And I'm not going to go into, I'm going to open a can of worms maybe, but I'm going to say this. George Floyd's death was tragic. He was murdered by Derek Chauvin, and that cop was convicted for it. But we know that George Floyd was a criminal. He was, and in fact, allegedly he was trying to commit a crime at that time when the cops held him down. It was still wrongful death, but what I'm driving at is Elijah Mcclain, he did nothing wrong. He was just a massage therapist he was an introverted kid. He was probably a little autistic, maybe Asperger's or something relatable, because he says he's an introvert. Everybody said he had a gentle nature. Walking home, gets killed. That is the worst of the worst. And if these cops aren't convicted, Mama said, shut your mouth. I'm not saying no more. But I'll say this. I hope they spend the rest of their natural lives in an 8x10 cell.